Bruce, you must have something really good too.
Of course I do. It's Bruce Danielson, and I guess I'm here to entertain you too.
I'd like to call this informational meeting of Tuesday, March 8th, 2022 to order. I'd also like to make a note, a couple of counselors have contacted me. They're on their way, running just slightly late, but they'll be showing up. We're going to start off with Accessibility Housing Advisory Board report. Marshall Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We met last Wednesday morning and had a very good meeting. Matt Tobias did a presentation for us, and what we've been doing is trying to identify sites for rehabs. And of course, land is the challenge. Where can we do these things and where can we put these homes? And as we try to revitalize the core and do many other things. So anyway, he walked us through a number of possibilities in different areas all throughout different parts of Sioux Falls. And we talked a little bit about what the pros and cons might be to each of those locations. And I think we might even be touring those, the way I understand it, coming up as well, just to kind of take a look around. But some of those things, some of the areas in that we talked about sound pretty exciting. So I think we'll have hopefully some good updates and things moving along here in the very near future. And there is your update.
Thank you, Councilor Selberg. This time we'll have council remarks. Are there any council remarks? Seeing none, we'll jump into our first of two exciting presentations today, Annual Crime Stats Update by the Police Chief, John Toom.
Councilors, thank you for your time. Again, Police Chief John Toom. We presented this information this morning at a press brief for members of the media and for the public as well, but wanted to also provide this information for you at this time. And this is comprehensive stats from 2021 compared to previous years, as well as some other things happening at the police department. Again, looking at our violent crimes and property crimes per 1,000, a lot of the narrative that gets sucked in about crime is really hard to compare community to community, as sometimes it's apples to oranges, not apples to apples. So we keep a close look at the per capita numbers and how they trend from year to year. And you'll see the top line is the property crimes per capita, and the bottom line is other violent crimes per capita. And while we see ebbs and flows and slight ups and downs, it basically maintains that trend line that we see. And we're looking for deviations on that as we go through crime stats. Again, stats come out in a variety of different ways. We have to just make sure we aren't making knee-jerk reactions. We're looking at what the numbers tell us and where the trends are leading us. Again, we take these in calls for service. We had record calls for service last year in 2021 at 128,196. And then we project out to 22 and 23, as well as look back to 2011. As our population has grown, our calls for service have grown as well. However, you'll notice that the population is growing at a steeper rate than our calls for service. And that, again, is a trend that we see as a good sign, as we're not growing in relation to that. And again, with last year's numbers, we're kind of projecting that 4,000 to 5,000 per year is what we'd add for people. Last year's 7,000 changes the dimensions of things. And so we'll be looking keenly at 2022, what that population growth brings and how these trends will continue. But we're not really doing our job unless we're looking out even deeper into 2030. And what's going to happen in the future. Again, these projections are based on 2.5% city population growth with a 1.95% call for service increase per year. And again, if we look out to 2030 with 152,000 calls for service and a population of 253,000, it's why all these things are important, to be preparing for the future and looking what's ahead and just projecting that growth and seeing where we need to be on a variety of fronts as that develops. But again, as we look through, again, this is mostly about crime stats. In 2021, we saw 24,122 investigative cases. We see that go up remarkably, and part of that is that really people in Sioux Falls feel the openness and comfort to report stuff that happens to them as far as crimes. We've made it easier through phone reporting, through other reporting systems, and we don't really want to accept being victimized in our community, but we want people to report what happens, even if it seems trivial. I think you'll see in other communities where people just don't report stuff because they think nothing will happen. Well, we encourage our community to make reports because it helps us plot trends. It helps us see where things are developing and look at different neighborhoods and take a really intelligent approach towards crime. Again, looking ahead though, we will grow and these cases will increase as our population increase. Again, putting more demands on our people, and our detective section does outstanding work, but as you can see, the demands on them are placed higher. We sometimes focus on patrol, forget about our investigators, and they have, again, plenty of work that will continue to grow as we grow as a community. We look at national data as far as our clearance rates, and our clearance rates speak for themselves. They're higher and far above the national average. You'll see 100% homicide clearance in 2019 and 20, 80% in 2021. The asterisk is that still is an open investigation as far as the Gilberto shooting that took place last year. But looking at our rape, aggravated assault, and stolen vehicle numbers, again, our clearance rate, the work our investigators do, high above the national average in clearing these cases. Looking at staffing is another hot topic issue that we talked about. Again, our authorized strength is 284, and through the graciousness of the council and the mayor's office, we have seen growth within our officers over the past several years to reach the challenges and the growth of the community. We currently sit at 280 officers with 4 slots unfilled. 248 are fully off probation and 32 in some status of training. That's either academy training or field training. As we see these numbers push out, we again start to see how we can utilize those officers fully and really get our patrol strength up, and that allows us to fill other spots within the department and make sure that we're staffing all our areas appropriately. Look at homicides again. 2021 was down from 5 from a record high the year before, 13. A lot to be said there. Again, we see that as a positive trend. That's back to what we're traditionally more used to as opposed to last year, but 2020 in a lot of reasons was an outlier in many ways. And so again, continue to monitor that trend and hope for more of that single digit that we've grown accustomed to, which for a community our size is remarkable. Rapes again, up slightly, and all these stats are set behind the backdrop of our city population growth as well. Again, a statistical uptick, but really nothing that really shows us any outlier trends. This is worth noting, our aggravated assaults down, both domestic aggravated assault and aggravated assault. Again, simple assault, domestic simple assaults down, as well as simple assaults kind of plateauing or going down a little bit as well. Again, 2020 was a bit of a unique year, but again, these numbers going down in both these situations is a testament to our police department, but more importantly, our community partners, Compass Center, Children's Inn, Call to Freedom, The Link. There's work that needs to be done outside of police work when it comes to these cases, and that's what support we're providing before these incidents happen and what support we're providing after these incidents happen as well. Because really, police sometimes deal with just one component of this, and how victims receive support and move on from these incidents is ultimately more important sometimes for outcomes in lowering these numbers. And I think something to keep an eye on. Again, a testament to our community partners who do great works in these areas and we support as a city. Robbery, again, worth noting, robbery is taking something by force. It's sometimes used interchangeably with burglary, but they are 2 separate crimes. And robberies decreased from 2020 from 2021 as well. Burglary, we are seeing an increase, and these are a lot of times unoccupied structures where we see these burglaries go up. Crimes of opportunity, people understanding that somebody's not home and utilizing that. And again, it comes back to some good neighborhood watch programs, making sure our doors are locked, making sure we secure our facilities, and making sure that we take care of that. And I stressed on this quite a bit. If you watch the press brief today, stolen vehicle numbers at a record high. And again, we can't beat this drum enough. A lot of these are vehicles left in cars, keys left in cars, and crimes of opportunity that we are allowing. While Sioux Falls is a remarkably safe community for our size, we still have to make sure we do our part not to allow ourselves to be victimized, and lock our houses, lock our cars, make sure we're doing our part to make sure we don't become victims. And I'll have a few slides later for you to look at on that. And then larcenies up a little bit as well, but projected, especially typically if you look at the numbers themselves, nothing of too much alarm. And vandalism's down, again, well within that trend line as well. Topic of conversation within the community and stressed pretty hard at the press briefing this morning is the amount of fentanyl we've seized in 2021. A record amount, 2,028 grams of fentanyl, which is a substantial amount, and methamphetamine near record amounts seized as well at 129 pounds. A testament to our work of our Sioux Falls Drug Area Task Force consisting of the Sioux Falls Police Department, Minnehaha County Sheriff's Office, DCI, and numerous federal partners. Our investigators and our officers are doing a great job at taking drugs off the street. Reality is we had record deaths last year as well. And this is just part of the conversation. People live under the illusion sometimes that we can seize enough drugs to really eliminate or cause the drug problem to go away. That's not the case. It's just one component of it. The family education piece, how we talk to our young people, how we have family conversations is ultimately more impactful. And 29 people died last year. They all have families and mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters and kids, and that's the impact. Again, covered it pretty extensively in the press brief today, that this is a community conversation that you'll hear more from the city, not just the police department, health and other entities too, as we start to look at what we can do to educate people on this topic. Again, as a police officer, from the impact of these, every officer can tell you on the calls they've been on this that what they take away from more is the anguish and tears of the mothers and fathers and brothers and sisters who have just lost loved ones, and how we're communicating that to young people. Date myself a little bit, but I remember as a kid hearing the story of Len Bias, right, and other people who died. Well, we need to really hammer home to young people that they don't get to make multiple mistakes when it comes to fentanyl, that you only get maybe one mistake and it takes your life. And I think as parents, as educators, and as a community, we need to communicate that message to our kids now more than ever. And again, a lot of times in youth, we operate under the discretion that, oh, I get to learn from my mistakes. Well, as I said in the press briefing this morning, the stove is hot. I'm telling you it's hot. You don't need to touch it to find out that it's hot. Like, don't get burned by this, and this is something we need to be upfront about. Here's an example of the M30 pills that we've been dealing with, produced typically in Mexico or overseas, and then moved into our country. Not made in pharmacies, but made to look like pharmaceutical pills with fentanyl, and they're highly addictive and can cause a lot of problems, as we've seen with fentanyl, and numerous fit inside of a quarter. With drug trade, where there's a market, where there's a demand, there is a supply, and there is currency, and there is guns to go along with it. Narcotics crime, while we work against it, it bleeds over into other areas when it comes to how children are treated, spousal relationships and things of that nature, and just gun violence in general. And again, we're doing work, but the community also needs to be part of that as well, in communicating to young people and communicating to each other about the dangers of this and what we need to tackle as a group collectively. Again, back to some initiatives you'll see from us coming out on our social media. I encourage anybody listening, I know there are people that watch these meetings, put this out on your social media, because you'll see it from our social media as well. Don't forget to lock your car. We're calling it a 9 p.m. routine. Stolen car items may be used to commit other crimes, as we've seen time and time again. And I'm not telling you what to do, but try this out. Set an alarm on your phone, 9 o'clock, create some sort of ritual where you hit your key fob. I know your neighbors aren't asleep yet. You can make your car horn honk if you got to double tap the lock button and create it so it's just part of your nightly routine. Because my hope is we could maybe reverse this trend of stolen vehicles, and it's not going to be the police department that does it alone. It's going to be the community that does it. So expect to be annoyed by the Sioux Falls Police Department and our message to lock your car, secure your valuables, and things of that nature. Again, a few more just full staffing initiatives that we've touched on in the past, but just want to talk on with you again. Our remote training academy is going well. The ability to house officers here rather than Pier for their basic training when necessary. Pier sometimes has room for us and we go out there as we are right now, but to have that ability is huge. Thankfully, we've been marketing and working on recruitment strategies and trying to get our name out there. We've seen that with recruits when many agencies across the country are struggling. We still have a fairly consistent number of applicants that we're receiving. It still requires some development, and as I've said in the past, we need to keep our foot on the gas because there is a predictable level of turnover, retirements, and things of that nature that happen, and we need to be on the front end. And then through the council and through the mayor's office, incentives such as referral bonus, hiring incentives have fully recognized the challenging hiring climate, not just for police, but for city and all employees in general. And I think we've unveiled a lot of good incentives and a lot of good initiatives over the past year that have made us an attractive employer, and we need to continue to be on that. We talked about our certified officers in the past. We have seen a rise in certified officers applying with our agency. Again, we can get them out on the street, get them trained quicker, but again, we do not compromise quality or anything of that nature. If you're not a fit for our agency, you will not work for our agency. And again, the standards are the same and they must be met. However, there is some efficiency within this. We are finding, however, some people that apply for our agency that we don't hire end up staying in Sioux Falls anyway because they like the community so much. Again, a testament to our community. We're seen as a desirable place to move, live, and raise a family, and that helps us recruit and does that very, very well. I think we've touched on the referral bonuses. We've started with other city departments as well to try to encourage we're our own best recruiters when it comes to filling employment vacancies. And I think we can do that even more as a community if people within the community are recognized as being good matches for our department. I think it's important we all work together to recruit that and get them as part of our agency and as our city employees. One of the slides here is missing, but I have prepared some things on body cams. It was a request of the council that we talk a little bit about body cams. Body cams are first instituted in 2018, and we started on a limited basis. And then in 2021, fully implemented them in that spring. And they've become a standard practice and way of doing business ever since then. They've been extremely beneficial on numerous accounts, both from an evidentiary standpoint and a complaint standpoint. And a fun fact for you, we produce roughly 450 hours of video per day as a police department. The financial commitment that this council and city made is substantial in this technology, but again, it has become the industry standard. We embrace this. It has become a great part of how we do business, but the financial commitment is recognized and appreciated as it takes money to make an initiative like this work. The particular questions in the past have been raised as far as releasing a video. I'm going to invite City Attorney Keith Allenstein to address some of these topics, as he is very well versed on this topic and handles it on a regular basis.
Get the right way there. Good afternoon, Keith Allenstein, City Attorney's Office. Been asked to speak to you a little bit about releasing of body cam footage and generally why we don't do that. A number of considerations. First and foremost is 127-1.5 subsection 5, which specifically exempts out investigative materials from public record request. This includes not only reports, officer videos, photographs, things like that. Basically everything outside of a state accident report, which is addressed elsewhere in statute and is specifically publicly available. And then general call for service information is also publicly available. A couple of other considerations that may not be considerations in every case, but certainly in a number, are subsections 22 and 23 of 127-1.5. Those involve unreasonable release of personal information. If you are a victim, if you're relaying information that is very personal to you and those kind of things, that can be a basis for not releasing, in addition to the general prohibition. And then also records which if released could endanger the life or safety of any person. Informant information, just the fact that people are giving information to police can be a dangerous business to them. We actually, there was for a period of time, I don't know, I haven't checked in a while, a Facebook post called 605 Snitch, where information about people that gave information to police officers was being put on Facebook for intimidation and retribution. So these are real concerns, and they aren't just in the movies and other places. They're happening right here. So additionally, there are a few other state statutes that talk about specifically criminal information being confidential. A few statutes here, 23.510 and 11, talk about the fact that these types of materials are technically only supposed to be disclosable to law enforcement agencies. Obviously, there are some exceptions to that elsewhere in statute. If you're charged with a crime, you get access to certain information for your constitutional rights to defend against that, and a few other exceptions. But generally, this information is confidential by state statute, and the release of it is potentially a Class 2 misdemeanor. So we hear a lot about transparency, but there are reasons why we do what we do. Marsy's Law additionally can come into play. Provisions of Marsy's Law allow the victim of a crime to prevent the disclosure to the public of information that could be used to intimidate or harass them. So if that victim has made known that he or she does not want that information released, we have to abide by that or face the consequences of violating their rights under a constitutional amendment. Additionally, we also have to inform a victim if we get a request that their information be released under this. And then lastly, just some kind of general considerations regarding the integrity of an investigative process. You know, with some of the happenings at the police department and other places, you've probably heard this coming from the mayor's office and other places, but we follow the same rules, whether it's one of our former officers or somebody else. We expect the process to be able to play out fairly. That includes the rights of the prosecution, the rights of the defense, and everybody involved. We have a classic example of what can happen when that information is released in the Attorney General's case, where information about his interview was released while the trial process was still in play. That judge was not thrilled with that and demanded that be stopped. So several different reasons why we do not release. It has nothing to do with a lack of wanting to be transparent. We have statutory, constitutional, and other fairness considerations that we take into consideration on those decisions. So happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you both for your presentation. Counselors, questions? Counselor Starr.
Yes, so let's get a microphone. Chief, my son a couple of weeks ago had some knee surgery and was prescribed 9 or 12 Oxycontin tablets. But as an automatic, as a standing order from the physician, was prescribed also Narcan, which really, first was, I didn't think I had to pay for it. So that was the first thing that, you know, as we're going through the surgery things. But I was intrigued by the number of times that your officers have administered Narcan for an overdose. What's the policy? Where do we head next? Is it the same people that we're administering it to over and over again? How do we get them the help that they need, and what's the follow-up from there?
Yeah, that's a great, we have investigators that are earmarked for these types of cases, that work these overdose cases, that provide resources, that provide different things. The additional component too is we're often behind drug trends in the upper Midwest, which is actually a good thing. Like, we kind of see things come a little later here, and you hear the stories about different parts of the country, especially with heroin, about people who are just getting Narcaned again and again and again. We're not to that point yet, and I think that's where you start to identify, you know, programs where identifying people who have had this again. But our detectives still know the key players and people who have been impacted by this pretty well. And now it's really kind of a choice to, here's some resources, whether or not you choose to use them. The link has the ability to kind of funnel people certain directions. And we've kind of put some of the pre-work in place as a community. And now I think with some of the new facilities opening too and the treatment options that are there, I think we can start pushing them collectively towards that as a community. But yeah, we're to the point where when we first got Narcan, we're like, well, how often are we actually going to use this? To the point where, especially as we see influxes into the community of especially hot batches or hot doses, where we're using it pretty regularly. But yeah, it's interesting. I had a wrist surgery not too long ago, got 40 oxycodone. It didn't use hardly any of them before I turned them in. But it's, yeah, to put Narcan out, because there are accidental issues that happen with that as well. And Narcan can bridge the gap to get you more advanced medical care. Correct.
Parenting teenagers, I feel a lot better having it in the house, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Or fortunately, so having access to it, like I said, at first I complained about what it cost, and then I realized it was nickels by the time we were done to help someone, that it would be available to have it in the house. But to follow up on that is, again, as a parent of several teenagers right now and other young adults, when I first joined the council, one of the things that I heard was a 14-year-old girl at a town hall meeting get up and say, hey, my friend is addicted to meth and is having some meth issues. What do I do? Where do I go? And the folks in the room just kind of looked at themselves and said, do we call the police? Do we call healthcare? Do we call, Ask a Nurse? Or I'm sure Ask a Nurse is around, but it was at the time. But, what do you tell parents? If one of my teenagers comes to me tonight and says, hey, my friend Sarah is having some issues and using meth, what's the next step for a parent?
Well, and we have so many great established help outlets here. As far as 211 has become a very effective resource to route people the right direction and kind of a holder. With the link that's come through, I just had the privilege of touring the new Avera behavioral health, but also substance abuse facilities that we have in place and other private entities that do that. And I always tell anybody, if you have a question that the answer is not clearly defined on, we underestimate how valuable a resource 211 is to our community and how we can get people pushed in the right direction. Because ultimately, they're not going to feel comfortable getting that information from a police officer all the time. And there's other resources out there that can steer them that direction.
Thank you.
Yep.
Counselor Selberg.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks for the presentation. Overall, it's encouraging to see a lot of those statistics going down, but of course, you still see plenty of other things there that are sobering. The one question that I had, the fentanyl one, where you'd seized this much more than last year, whatever that was. Was there one big bust or something that?
There was multiple substantial busts.
Okay.
Really, and again, I had it at the press briefing this morning, but a package about this big of M30s is about 3,000 pills, street value $75,000 to $100,000. The market here is higher, much like we saw in the past with some other drugs with crack in the past, where the street value here is much higher than in other communities where the supply is better. So there's been a spike in the value here as far as what they can sell them for, which then brings more quantity or supply in. So because of that, there was substantial bust this year. And again, great work by our task force and their partnerships that they have to take some of that out.
Right. And then the other one, the auto thefts, which was kind of a startling number too, with how many, are they all people that are sometimes careless like me? I've left my keys in my car before, but I mean, how are all these being,
Yeah,
how are
one
the
of my-
ones being stolen that aren't being left with the keys and when the number's that high, or is it all that?
It's the vast majority are keys in the car. On Monday, I get a briefing from our property crimes detectives, and they now make it a point to put the stat in is how many cars were stolen, how many had the keys left in it. And it's almost, at least this week it was good. It was like 8 cars stolen, but one week it was 22 cars stolen with 21 with the keys left in them. And the other one was a trailer. And then a couple of those cars had guns in them, you know, to make that situation even worse. And so I think, again, modern technology and key fobs has actually made it easier to do this. And I know with a car I just bought, you can make it honk at you when you leave your key in the car. So putting some of that stuff that may be an inconvenience may be a good reminder to figure out where your keys are at.
All right. All right, thank you.
Other questions? Counselor Brecky?
On the keys in the car, I think, I do appreciate your approach to it. I think that's a perfect opportunity for public education. I mean, if we could just get that message out, I think people will go, well, duh, you know, it's not that hard to do, and we're still from South Dakota, and sometimes we still think we're in nirvana, and we just don't think that's really an issue, and that must be how people feel. It's a good thing on the one hand that they feel that confident that it's not going to happen, but it is a wake-up call, and I think public education program is, you know, it could just turn that around, turn it on its head. Yeah, the question, if you could go back to the slide with the homicides, and you did mention that the, that 2020, you know, that is extraordinary. You said it was an aberration. Can you just, you know, fill out that detail a little more?
Sure.
What was the aberration? Was it,
So-
I'm sure it was COVID, partial COVID, but just tell me as much as you can what your explanation is why that's so substantially higher than 19 and 21.
I think time will tell as far as from the education and research piece on what exactly 2020 was like for us as a society. Because you'll see aggravated assaults spiked in 2020, simple assaults spiked in 2020, robbery spiked in 2020. And so not completely unpredictable that homicides would spike in 2020, but a lot of what we saw within 2020, because again, the apples and oranges equation, every community is different. We did see a distinct rise in juvenile gun violence in 2020 as well. And the reality is we have outstanding health systems who have done great work in treating some of our trauma victims, but the reality is that some of these injuries are severe enough that our great health systems can't do anything about that. So we did see a rise in that. We're able to identify many of the key players that were involved in some of these incidents and make inroads in there. And again, even though we're a city of 200,000, we can still identify and go after elements that may be causing a little bit more disturbance. And I think in 2020, we look at it, it was just a particularly violent year as far as gun violence amongst youth. And we have seen that subside a little bit, but it's a warning or a cautionary tale for the future. Again, this will become an issue in the next year with some legislative issues, some summer studies, some other things that are going to happen when it comes to juvenile violence and juvenile justice system. It's just a cautionary tale of what we need to put in on the front end to make sure this issue doesn't escalate within our community. Because like you said, we're growing as a community, and we are remarkably safe for a city of 200,000+ people. I'll say that again, but that doesn't require us we shouldn't rest on our laurels and be complacent in that and try to get ahead of some of these issues as we move forward.
Is it gang-related as well? Do we have any information that would indicate that? Or is it just maybe sort of the bubbling things that could turn into that?
Yeah, a lot
if
of
we
the
don't
gang
watch
violence stuff that we even saw from earlier in my career, where people are looking for affiliated gangs or gangs that are affiliated to certain national groups, or we don't see that as much anymore. But just because it's not associated with a major gang doesn't mean that 5 people can't get together and decide to do no good, right? And things of that nature. And so, again, we watch how young people behave and how people are just joining together, maybe doing things, and work to make sure that if we see that early sign of gang activity, regardless of what they call themselves, that we're making sure we're making proactive steps. But ultimately, we'd rather make more investments in middle school and grade school kids now to just turn them off from that idea of violence, build positive relationships, mentorships, community. We'll have some exciting initiatives we'll roll out later this year. I'm not ready to talk about just yet within the community that will show how the police department can partner with youth and build relationships, but also how as we as a community make that investment up front. I think there's a lot of exciting things that are going to happen in Sioux Falls in 2022 from multiple fronts on how we interact with youth, and when the police department's excited to be part of that.
Thank you.
Other questions? Seeing none, I just would like to thank you very much for your presentation and giving us more clarity on how body cams are used today and how the information is not given out based on statutes and ordinances. Really appreciate, because I know the public really was interested in that too. So,
And these are things that I believe through the rest of my career will evolve. Just how statutorily we look at things, how things change. We just always have to be aware that things will change. But again, as long as we understand what the current rules in the playbook are and how to abide by them, that's the most important thing for us. So,
well, thank you for all you do.
yep, thank you. Thank you, Council.
Now we'll move on to our next presentation, the Cyber Innovation Park.
Good evening, Council. Jeff Eckhoff, Planning and Development Services. Glad to be here with you tonight. Congratulations on your win this afternoon, Councilor Jensen. Begrudgingly, congratulations. There are days where I think I have one of the best jobs in the city, because I get to talk to you about really wonderful and transformative types of projects that have come to our city and the opportunities that we have. Today is one of those days. On January 26th, Governor Noem was in town and sat on a dais out at Great Shots along with Mayor Tenhake and Bill Gasson from Sanford Health, and the 3 individuals behind me that you'll hear from in just a couple minutes. Tony Van Huysen representing the Board of Regents, Miles Beacom with Premier Bankcard, and President Josie Marie Griffiths, President of Dakota State University, to talk about the DSU Applied Research Lab and the opportunity that's before us here in our community to have that facility here. Those of us who have watched economic development, watched our city growth, and watched the stability and economic viability of our community realize a lot of that's based in the diversity of our jobs and our economy. Like a lot of communities, we started as an industrial agriculture town, moved into manufacturing, heavy industry, moved into services, both retail and professional services, and of course the healthcare. And then in the 80s, with the transformation of financial services, has grown that industry tremendously in our town. Today is that opportunity to take that next step into what you'll hear in the coming minutes from these folks about a cyber facility. And you've been hearing about the need, particularly with what's going on in the world today, with the increase in the demand for those jobs across the country in all sectors of private and government service right now. I just want to reference you to the site. Roughly, I've got, I think it's close, and they have a better map that's at your desk on the site, and they'll talk about it. But this is on the campus of the Sanford Sports Complex. And I just want to briefly remind you how public investment and the private leverage that comes with that and the investment that comes with that. Back in 2008, the city announced a partnership where we would put in the junior football fields, Sanford Sports would donate the land, and that started the whole process of that public-private partnership on this site. In 2012, the city put in a TIF to help develop that area, and what followed from that was the field house, the Pentagon, the tennis facility, Shields Iceplex, Great Shots, a walk-in clinic, a hotel, and a restaurant with another hotel recently announced, and of course the announcement of the turf fields for softball, baseball, and soccer that's coming. It's under construction right now. The presentation you're about to hear this afternoon will deal with the project. It'll be an opportunity for you to learn more about what's going to happen out there and talk about that. Tonight at the council meeting, Director Pritchett will talk to you about the money and the financing of that. So I get the best part, I get to talk about the fun stuff, he gets to find the money. So with that, I'd like to introduce Tony Van Huysen with the Board of Regents, and he'll kick off the presentations. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm Tony Van Huysen, a member of the South Dakota Board of Regents. Pleased to be here tonight to talk very briefly about this, and as Mr. Eckhoff just said, this is good news for Sioux Falls and for our state and an exciting opportunity. You know, just to build a little on what he just said, you look back 50, 60 years ago, there's an article that Ralph Brown at USD wrote comparing Sioux Falls to Sioux City. I'm sure some of you have seen it before, but it looked at the demographics and the economics and population of those two cities in the 1960s, which were very similar, and if anything, Sioux City was a little larger and more prosperous, and then looked at how those two cities evolved over the next 50 years to today, where I think Sioux Falls' population may be close to double what the Sioux City MSA is, and a lot of prosperity. And why is that? Well, it's what Mr. Eckhoff just said. We've diversified the economy in this city through finance, through healthcare, through all the retail and the many other things we've seen. And that's what we're talking about tonight, is a whole new industry of cybersecurity and these cyber jobs that could be coming to Sioux Falls and just bring a whole nother sector to this city and this part of the state. What I think is particularly exciting is what a partnership this is between so many different players. The Board of Regents, the state of South Dakota, the legislature just gave final passage to these bills yesterday, as you probably know, and the governor has said she'll sign them. Hopefully you with the city will be a partner. I know that's what you'll be considering over the next 2 weeks. But also really the same industries that have expanded the economy in Sioux Falls. You have Sanford Health stepping up with the land from the healthcare industry. You have Mr. Sanford and Premier Bank coming from the financial services. So we see how once you get something going and you get things spinning, that the success breeds more success, and that's what really makes this exciting. From the perspective of the Board of Regents, we will be the owner of this facility and really the landlord. The model, which is the same model that's used for the Discovery District, is that there's a nonprofit corporation that is created with the Board of Regents as the sole member, but we appoint a separate board of directors, and that operates as a non-state entity, so that the people working there are not state employees. It's not state budget. It's self-sustaining through the activity that is generated. We have experience, a little bit different models, but the research park at SDSU and some of the activity at the School of Mines, and even the little more removed from the Regents, but the Sanford Underground Lab and LEED, the old Home State Lab, are all examples of things like this, where we are leveraging the resources that this state has to create new opportunities for economic activity. And so I'd like to turn it over now to Miles Beacom, who you all know, CEO of Premier Bank Card, and somebody who's had a lot to do with supporting this effort at Dakota State, but also supporting so many important things in Sioux Falls. And he can talk about why they're excited about this and why they see it as important as well. So, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you, and thanks for allowing me some time to speak to this afternoon. I'm Miles Beacom, CEO of Premier Bank Card, and I really want to touch on three things. And the first is opportunity, strength, and then the future. And Tony hit it on the head. when you compare Sioux Falls to Sioux City. And my parents moved from Sioux City to Sioux Falls in 1954. And I still have a lot of relatives down in Sioux City, so it's always a great, being competitive, it's nice to be able to share the success that we continue to have in Sioux Falls. But that's because we've been open to change, and it's been phenomenal when you look at the changes and the success that Sioux Falls has had. And that's not by accident. When I was a kid and graduated from college, there weren't a lot of jobs in South Dakota. The year before I graduated, a lot of my friends left the state for opportunity. When I graduated, and it goes back a few years, 1981, I thought I was going to have to leave the state for a good job. I was fortunate. Citibank was transitioning from New York to South Dakota, and I was able to get my foot in the door there and learn as much as I could, and it's continued to help my career grow. When Denny Sanford came to me to help start Premier Bank Card, that was really a turning point in my life. But it all went back to Citibank. Citibank gave me the tools to be successful. They also changed the landscape in South Dakota. At that time, when the New Yorkers came to South Dakota to train us, they didn't think they could really train us to perform at the same level they did in New York. And our goal was always within 30, 60 days to be able to outperform them both in productivity and quality-wise, and we did that. And they just took a step back, and everyone in the nation really took a step back and said, why in the world did Citibank go to South Dakota? And then they seen the success from Citibank. And when you look at the success here in Sioux Falls from the financial industries as well as the healthcare and other industries, you go, oh my goodness, Sioux Falls has really changed from that 1980-81 timeframe. Right now we have that same opportunity when you look at the strength of this community. This cybersecurity and cyber research opportunity we have is really, I would say, the next really big change that we can make in Sioux Falls and in South Dakota to really be able to keep the youth in the state in the future. Citibank was also great because it was able to bring back a lot of South Dakotans that left the state to come back to South Dakota. They had a chance for a strong career. This is going to be the same way. Right now, we have kids leaving the state to DC and other large cities around the country for cybersecurity and cyber research because we don't have those opportunities. With Innovation Park, we're going to have that facility to house the first building 500 individuals at pay jobs of $100,000 or more. Think about that, 500 kids being able to stay here or return to South Dakota and continue to give us opportunity. And then you look at the impact that the healthcare industry's had on Sioux Falls. You look at what the financial industry has done in Sioux Falls, and it's just not employees. But then you look at volunteer time in the community. You look at people that are on boards. You look at the impact it's had on all of the different organizations in the community, from Special Olympics to just volunteering and mentoring within the community. It's amazing the impact that just these two industries have had. This new cybersecurity and cyber research isn't going to be any different. They're going to have an incredible impact on the strength and the future of South Dakota. And I just encourage you to continue to support cyber security with Dakota State and the partnership. And Tony mentioned it, it's hard to believe the partnerships that have come together so this would work. From the state, from the city, from Dakota State, from public industries such as Sanford Health, as well as First Premier Bank and Premier Bank Card as well. You don't see that many different organizations, both private and public, coming together for success, for future successes this as well. But thank you very much for the time this afternoon. Anything we can do to help you with your thought process, let us know. But this is going to be great for Sioux Falls. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome.
Everyone. Thank you. I'm Yosei Marie Griffiths, president of Dakota State University, and I'm pleased to be here and very excited to tell you a little bit more about this project. What we've put together is a plan and a public-private partnership to create and stimulate a very vibrant cyber research industry in South Dakota, basically located here in Sioux Falls and Madison. This industry doesn't cover all of cybersecurity. The cybersecurity industry is getting much, much larger. The current estimate of vacancies in the United States 2 weeks ago was 402,000. So we're not going to fill all of those positions, but we're taking a slice of the cybersecurity industry. That is the cybersecurity industry that addresses national security and defense. So really, the kinds of sponsors we'll have for the research we're doing will be Department of Defense, the intelligence agencies, Department of Homeland Security, and the National Security Agency. That's the slice that we're addressing with this particular project. This particular project will grow an ecosystem of others who will want to come and locate close by to those people. But that's the core of this particular project. There are two real reasons, well, really three reasons why we developed the project. The first is there's nothing going on in the Midwest, I mean, of any size or any scope. I saw that when I first came, and I said, let's plot where the cybersecurity jobs are in the United States, and they're basically on the East Coast, the West Coast, Texas, and Florida. I mean, that's basically it. There's nothing much that measures. There's a teeny blip near Colorado Springs because of the Air Force Academy. So there's nothing going on, and that was actually accentuated for me. I was just recently on the National Security Commission for Artificial Intelligence, and occasionally we had to meet in a secure facility. We either had to go to Washington, D.C., or we had to go to Silicon Valley. There was nothing in between, and unfortunately our facility in Madison wasn't fully finished at that time. But the other two reasons are this growing demand for cyber research talent, and then our desire, as Miles had mentioned, to keep more of our graduates in South Dakota. From Beacom College, we lose about a third of our graduates from the state. Of our sort of highly, those graduates who have got their clearances and they're going into this sort of specialized work, we lose 2/3. So we really need to try and keep them in South Dakota. What we did a few years ago is we moved into research, and we built a facility in Madison called the Madison Cyber Labs, the MAD Labs, if you like. And these are labs that perform a whole variety of different kinds of research related to cyber and cybersecurity, not all absolutely cybersecurity, but cyber-related things. What's different about this lab is every project is externally funded. And we broke out one lab, and it's called our Applied Research Lab, and it's in a separate connected facility, and it's in a facility that's been built to the standards that you need to build a sort of high-level secure facility. And you can't go in there unless you have the appropriate clearance. And even then, you can't go into all parts of it unless you have the need to know to be in a specific part of it. It's a facility that has been accredited by the appropriate defense officials. So we have an accreditation, that's an important factor. But all those external sponsors of our research are interested in our graduates. They're interested in our students, but they're more interested in our graduates, and they want to get earlier access to our graduates, and so they're interested in working with us. So the other piece to this, as we got the facility accredited, is then we at DSU were in effect licensed as a federal contractor to perform that highest level of work. So there are three things that go together with this project. One is a facility, an accredited facility, which means you've built it to all the special specifications that exist. The second piece is, in effect, the license. They call it a different name, but it just confuses everyone if I give you the name. It's really a license to conduct that kind of research. And the third is a flow of people to populate the positions that are needed to conduct the research. So in Madison, we built this facility, a small applied research lab. It was accredited in April of 2019. Unfortunately, COVID came along. So we actually got our license to operate, but we couldn't actually open the facility until the federal government had come in and done some work in the building and set it up for us. So we actually didn't open it until July of 2021. And we're now populating that location with researchers. We have, I think, we're just hiring another bunch, so I think we're going to have between 22 and 27 shortly, and our aim, year one, was to have 25. All but 2 of them are our own graduates, and the other 2 are our returning graduates who spent some time out on the East Coast and wanted to come back. And we've heard from others of our graduates out in the field that as the opportunities arise, they'd like to come back, bring their families back, be closer to family, etc. There are a number of reasons why they would come back. So as we looked at this, the defense contractors and the federal agencies that we were working with started to get very interested. And the interest sort of intensified once we were accredited, and then intensified even more as we opened the lab. And they're asking questions of us like, how long will it take you to give us 500 graduates? Can you give me 350? You're looking at growing about 200 graduates a year. We could take them all. We were getting those kinds of numbers. And so the idea was that let's look at expansion. Obviously, we've got something that has limited capacity in Madison. What if, we did the what if question, what if we were to expand? Well, that license that we have gives us a license to operate within a 50-mile radius of our campus. So there are really only two choices, Brookings and Sioux Falls. And Sioux Falls makes so much more sense because you've got an airport. You think about people coming from the two coasts, wanting to come in, maybe coming in for training, coming in to review the research that's going on, and being close to an airport becomes an important factor. The other thing is you've got the opportunity to attract these contractors to this part of the world because the cost of doing business is less. We're not reducing the starting salaries of these people. They will continue to get the 100,000 plus, and I dare say in 3 or 4 years, once we open this building, it'll be well above $100,000 starting salary. But the cost of doing business, we estimated by looking at the contractor rates on the coasts, was at least 30%, most frequently 40%, and occasionally 50% less than doing the same work on the coasts. Just the cost of business. I know your real estate costs are going up. The cost of business is going to go up, but it's not going up anywhere near the sort of costs that exist on the two coasts. So that makes us a very, very attractive proposition. So we decided to float the idea of expanding, and we floated the idea of the 500 since we'd had the one contractor ask us about 500. So we would like to build a building here in Sioux Falls of about 100,000 square feet. It should hold between 400 and 500 full-time equivalent, full-time researchers who will be on site. Then there was a definite interest expressed. Denny Sanford came forward and sort of offered $50 million to construct the building. Sanford Health offered us the land, 10 to 16 acres out by the sports complex, which is actually a very good location for this kind of a project because you're not having large numbers of people round and about. If the Department of Defense says what's going on around your building, we can say, well, people are playing soccer and playing baseball, and it's not as if you've got large crowds milling around because those facilities are not really fully accessible. So the idea was, let's put it out there. That makes sense. The other attraction for going to that site is that Sanford Health had just announced the fact that they were going to locate the virtual care center, the sort of hub of their new virtual health services across the state and beyond from that location. And we are working with Sanford Health in a strategic alliance on other issues. But it just made a lot of sense that if we co-located right next to them, and I think you've all got the one pager that shows the buildings, those two facilities in and of themselves then become the anchor tenants, if you like, of a cyber innovation hub, a cyber innovation park. And so I should refer back to the fact that Forward Sioux Falls had raised some funds and committed $250,000 to DSU to plan a cyber/IT park. So we've got the beginnings of it with these two facilities. And that's why we refer to it as Cyber Innovation Park. That's what we think that area could be named. It would be very appropriate. It becomes a Midwest regional hub. So we're saying that Sioux Falls and Madison and the state of South Dakota become a regional Midwest hub for cyber research. and that will spawn all sorts of other activities. It will attract others to co-locate. I know there's interest on the part of some of the big IT companies, in part because they do large-scale contracts for the federal government, but also because of the flow of people that we're going to have available to them and a cost of living that's very reasonable for those people that they have coming. That all worked out, but in order to do that, in Madison, we are sort of at capacity with our Beacom College. We're graduating about 200 undergraduates a year and then a number of graduate students. And so we felt that we had to increase our capacity to actually double the number of graduates coming out of the Beacom College per year. And in order to do that, we made the request of the state, which was finally passed yesterday, $30 million to beef up the capacity, adding new faculty, adding appropriate academic support staff, and then priming the pump a little bit by expanding a program that actually started with Harrisburg School District and Sioux Falls School District to offer dual credit courses in cyber-related fields to high school sophomores, juniors, and seniors. And what we'd like to do now is make that available to all high school students, or any high school students who qualifies and wants to come in. So that's sort of accelerating the pipeline of students coming into cyber careers. One other component of the project that we have is that we want to offer students in related fields, just as they're maybe at the end of their junior year, students in computer science, in computer engineering, in software development, in artificial intelligence, etc., an intensive summer boot camp, 12-week intensive residential boot camp in cybersecurity. And we intend that the students that do very well in that boot camp, at the end of the boot camp, will be offered a job and will be put into the security clearance process, and then they'll go back to their home campuses because we're going to open that up to any college student in South Dakota. If we don't fill it, we probably go to some of our neighboring states, but we're opening that opportunity for others to come in. And in parallel with that, we intend to have some intensive training programs for people who've recently graduated, who maybe have those related degrees and want to add the cybersecurity capability on top of that. And then we'd go through the same process, but it probably wouldn't be a 12-week residential, it would be some other kind of configuration of coursework. So the idea is to try and populate this new facility, which we anticipate would open in the fall of 2024. 2024, but supply chain issues notwithstanding, there may be, it's a slow process. We have to have a very solid and documented construction process. There are requirements for the construction company. There are requirements for the subcontractors as well. We've been through all of that. We know the process. We have done it in Madison, and we got very good marks from the accrediting agency because of the detail and the orientation that we had taken to make sure that that occurred. So our proposal really is to build this building in Sioux Falls. We believe that that would lead to a research industry of at least $100 million a year. Could go up, depends on people's overhead rates. We're assuming a 50% overhead rate, but I've worked at a company that many, many years ago that had a 65% over rate, and we know that some of them are much higher than that. So it will bring people in. It will give them these high salaries. It will attract others to come and co-locate in Sioux Falls and in the area. And I believe in the long run, we'll also begin to spin off some other companies that will emerge from the research activity that we'd be engaging. So it's a very different model, perhaps not so different if we listen to Tony Van Huysen, because he's seen this process go through several times, but I think a rather intriguing process. And the public-private partnership that we've developed is very strong, and we hope that the city would join us. We'd love to have you as a partner. We think Sioux Falls is a place where this can be successful, and we think that if we move, I think other states around us are going to be very jealous. So, thank you very much. I stand ready for questions.
Thank you. Councilor Neitzer?
Thank you. Could you tell us, and just for education of the public, of the $10 million component that we are being asked to provide, what that would fund?
Yes, there are really three areas that would fund. The first area is is physical infrastructure. So there are things, as I've had conversations, there's the lighting, walkways, parking, landscaping, et cetera, things that would go outside the building that would be important. And we don't know exactly how much that's going to be because we've just put out the RFI for construction, for architects and construction companies. So that would be the first. I think if there are any of those kinds of costs, that's where your money would go to first. Second, we have some, what I would call organizational infrastructure. We will need some initial funding of business development and management and security. We're going to have security on the site from the beginning because of the intense way we have to build the building. And as we go into the building, we're going to have more. And as we open the building, we have to have 24/7, 365 security. And we may not have the building full. As the building fills up and we get the contracts will pay for those costs. But some initial funding of those, what I call organizational infrastructure costs, would be helpful. So that would be the second bucket that we would want to put your money in. And then the third is sort of programmatic infrastructure. And the only programmatic things we have at the moment that we've thought of are really workforce development through those boot camps and the intensive workshops that we would hold for professionals in the field. So I would say the number one priority would be the physical infrastructure, number two would be organizational, and number three would be the, what I call it, programmatic infrastructure.
Thank you. Just a few comments. Things I love about this is leveraging all of the money from our partners. It's hard to pass up spending 10 to get 80 more. And then you're talking about a lot of high-paying jobs, and so not only all of the money that they will be spending with disposable income, but then there's going to be the churn through the community and the compounding effect of all that money working its way through. And as somebody who's been working as a software engineer for 20 years, seeing more of these, more jobs in IT that will be available here, because I imagine you're going to have not only this, but you may have people who spin off from this and start their own businesses, other businesses that move in, it becomes maybe a tech center, and then you have more opportunities. We have some opportunities here in Sioux Falls, no doubt, but there's some areas in which there's not a lot of opportunity, and you really would have to go to a Minneapolis or to the coast to get some of those jobs. And as somebody who's been working with my company for 20 years, we've certainly pivoted. We've had to pivot in the last several years. Our job has changed. We spend a lot of time on security. I mean, that's all I've been doing for months is writing encryption code and security code, and we have to, we're constantly, what our customers demand from us has changed. And so that's all we do. It's just a lot of concern about security and threats, and they change every day. We had another one that came in today that made me late to get here. So it's going to be a big emerging industry, and like I said, it's going to help to keep, hopefully, the brain drain, because I hate to see the good students, head off out of state and maybe not come back, because this is such a great place to live. So, thank you.
Other questions, comments, counselors? Counselor Jensen.
Well, thank you for your presentation today, and sorry for wearing a USD shirt to your presentation. Next time I'll make sure to change before I come. I just think this is one of the biggest things to hit my radar in my public service life. One of the things that a mentor of mine said is Sioux Falls hits a lot of singles when it comes to our economic development, but there are few home runs that we hit. We hit John Morell's, we hit our financial sector, healthcare, and all of the offshoots that come out of that, like you've already stated. I don't think we know what's going to come out of what you guys are accomplishing here today. Premier Bank Card is one of the examples of an offshoot of Citibank. Wouldn't have been here. You have all of the different ag sectors in the community, and then you have Bank Corp that's building downtown with the Scherschlick project, and you have other agricultural stuff that is, all of these singles have allowed us to diversify our economy to be an attractive place for companies like yours, an institution like yours, to come here and thrive. So thank you for choosing Sioux Falls when you could have chosen other communities within 50 miles, and we appreciate your service and your leadership up there in Madison.
Other counselors? Seeing none, I've just got a few questions. And did I miss the timetable for moving dirt for getting, do you start in Madison and then finish that complex and then move to Sioux Falls, or are they both simultaneous?
The facility in Madison is built and is now being populated by researchers, so that we opened it up in July of last year. So that's going to continue. We have a call out for architects, and I believe we're going to be looking at those proposals coming in later this month. We think it'll probably be about a 1-year planning design process, so we think maybe a year from now we might be in the ground. And then we think it'll be depends on supply chain as to how quickly we can actually build, since we have special needs for this project.
And if you start a year from now with construction, when would you possibly see the first employee in the building?
The first employee would be, we would go with the federal fiscal year, which starts October the 1st. So it would be October the 1st, 2024, if everything moved very quickly and on time.
That's Councilor Selberg.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the presentation. Couple quick questions. So you touched on the 10 million that would come from the city goes to 3 things. I got the physical infrastructure, the organizational. What was the third part?
I called it programmatic infrastructure. That was for the boot camps and the and training of people in the field who want to get the cybersecurity add-on, if you like, to their degrees.
Okay.
And these would be people who would be sort of on their way to working in the facility in Sioux Falls.
Okay. And then, so like, you already have, am I understanding this correctly, some people doing this already that you've hired? You were talking about hiring 23 or 4 or 5 people already that are doing this in Madison right now?
Yes, absolutely. We have capacity in Madison for 125 or so. And we will be doing that while we're getting ready for this facility. We'll be building, and at the same time, of course, building those relationships with the project sponsors who are looking for more. And if I may, to answer the comment you made, every single contractor who's come with classified contracts has unclassified work in the IT area as well. So you're absolutely right. It's going to spin off additional activity beyond the core activity we're talking about.
Yeah, very exciting. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Brecky?
Just want to chime in and add my appreciation for the, very detailed explanation, but also the enthusiasm. I think it's going to change the trajectory really for the whole state. Because I was talking to you earlier, as we do in Sioux Falls, so goes the state. We are leaders, innovators, and every now and then we do hit one out of the park, and I think this is the next one. For me, it feels very Silicon Valley-like, on a smaller scale, but who knows the potential. Because it's that kind of a transformational opportunity. So I'm terribly excited about it. And as someone who sat in the bowels of City Hall in the 1980s, and now I've returned, and to Miles's discussion, I can remember thinking about we were going on strike, and after it didn't happen, we were preparing for John Morales to strike, and we were told as directors we need to cut the budget back and all of this thing, and John Morales struck, and we didn't feel a blip on the radar screen, and there was an acknowledgement by the then 5 commissioners that, hey, we're not a company town anymore. We're not just all about John Morrell. And we knew at that point it was kind of transformational that we transformed into a diverse enough situation that we just weren't a cow town anymore. And from that point forward, a lot of things that were planned happened, and a lot of things that just kind of happened, like the change of government and all those kind of things, I think allowed us to charge forward and continue to seize opportunities. So terribly exciting to be up here and be a part of it. Thank you.
Well, I don't see any further questions. I would just ask that you consider your team maybe writing a paper, writing a book on how you've threaded this needle between all of the entities that you're doing. And I know you're getting extremely close to the first finish line, and there's a couple more years to go. So if you have a scribe or somebody that can start taking notes, my hat's off to something that's this big and you're going to get it done. Thank you very much, and thank you for as Counselor Jens said, thank you for choosing Sioux Falls.
It's all about the faculty and the students. The faculty of the programs, the students come in and work hard. The students who come from South Dakota are clearable, more easily clearable than people from large cities because they've lived in small towns their whole lives and everybody knows them, and so everybody knows what their behavior is, including, police guys have gone. But that's what it's all about. It's, Dakota State had this sort of nugget, really, that was now beginning to grow and develop into the next phase of its existence. So thank you very much for your comments.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Our last item is public comment. If anybody would like to comment on any of either subject, now's the time to do it. Seeing nobody, Counselor Jensen, we're adjourned.